Boker Tov, we begin the sixth parak Hanodim in Amavushal. The first part of this discussion is about the difference between the following categories: Mavushal, something that's cooked; Tavshil, and we'll see that Tavshil refers to anything that is made lelafes boas hapas. Notes it has a certain liquid element to it, and therefore you dip your bread in it. And then we have something called a Masechet. Hanodim in Amavushal mutar b'tzli u'b'shaluk. If he took a neder that he wouldn't get benefit from mevushal, that means something that was cooked, as opposed to something that was roasted or that went through a process of shaluk, which means, okay, so here there's Rishonim, but the Ran learns that it's not completely cooked. Other Rishonim learn that it's overcooked. Omar, if he declares konim tavshil, so we're not talking about mevushal, but rather a tavshil. The word tavshil has a very specific meaning. Sheni toim. Asur b'maisa kedera rach. So again, when you have something that's cooked and it's soft, and we'll speak later on about cereals that are cooked, then that's considered maisa kedera. But mutar be'ava, he's permitted with something that's very thick and has no liquid element to it. In other words, sometimes it has rotev, and you dip your pas into it, and sometimes it's totally dry and thick, and the derech is not to eat it with pas. It's eaten by itself. And the definition of a Maisa Kedera is something that has this liquid element to it, has rotev, and it's malafis boas hapas. So the word tavshil now becomes like a generic term, and there are many things that are included under tavshil. However, Maisa Kedera is a specific kind of a tavshil, and therefore, if you took a neder on a Maisa Kedera, then it doesn't include other kinds of tavshil. Whereas tavshil, as a generic term, includes the specific case of Maisa Kedera. But again, it's got to be rach, so that it's derech l'lafos bos hapas. If it's ava, then it's not included in the neder, because you don't dip something bread into something that's totally dry. Furthermore, mutar bebeitza turmuta. Turmuta means they used to take an egg. Again, this is hard to imagine, but they dipped it into boiling water 1,000 times, and then 1,000 times into cold water. And it's very small. It shrivels up. You could eat it in one gulp. And you don't eat it with bread, and therefore, if it's not used l'lafes bos hapas, it's not included on the Maisa Kedera. I'm sorry, it's not included on the tavshil. Now, why would they do this whole process to shrink the egg to such a small size, such that you could just swallow it like a pill without even chewing it? And the answer is that this was medicinal. It was used as a medicine. Ubidlas haramutza. And he's also permitted to eat a kind of a pumpkin. And here we have machlokas exactly what the word remutza means. According to one opinion, remutza means it comes from a place called kruksa, and therefore it's called remusa. But according to another interpretation, remutza means delas hatmuna beremetz. Usually the word remetz, like if we learn to Perkira and Shabbos, means those ashes that are still burning after the process of of afia or bishul, and they used to take this glass and they used to submerge it in the remits. And in all these cases, it's not called a tavshil. It's outside the parameters of a tavshil, and therefore it's mutter b'neder if he took a neder min a tavshil. Now we get to the third discussion. What if he takes a neder on something specific? Hanoda b'maisa kedera, which we said was a specific form of a tavshil. Ein aser el b'maisa retachta. He's only prohibited from eating that which needs to cook and then to be boiled for a long, long period of time in a pot. And that's called a maisa kedera. So if you have something that, let's say, doesn't need a long process of bishul and boiling hot water, that would not qualify as a maisa kedera, and therefore it would not be prohibited if he took a neder of maisa kedera. Even though, again, had he taken a neder at tavshil, then we would expand that neder to include the scope of the neder, and it would include within it even something that doesn't require this long, long process of bishul and resicha. Now, in the notes here, he gives a number of examples of retachta, ma'aser retachta. The Aramaic here is a little bit challenging. For example, he has something called chalka. He's got something called targis. He's got tisni. Oh, the others are a little bit easier. He's got soles, orez, zorid. Zorid is a kind of a grass. Arson is flour that's made of barley, old barley. And what's common to all these different foodstuffs is that they all require a long process of bishul and resicha, and that's called maisa kedera. He prohibits himself from eating something which is quote unquote yored likdera, which means anything that's poured into a pot that's on the stove over the fire. Then he has enjoined himself from eating any foodstuff that needs to be put into a pot and boiled, even if it's not something that needs resicha and bishul harbe. So it means that by prohibiting himself from anything that goes into the kedera to be cooked, he is not limiting himself to what we call a maisa kedera, which equals to a maisa resachta. Here we're not talking about a maisa resachta, but rather about something that's misbashel b'kedera. And in the language and the formulation of his neder, it's yored l'kedera. The Gemara quotes a brisa, Tanya, and it's very interesting that Rav Yoshia in this brisa is going to disagree with our Mishnah. And the case is the first ratio of our Mishnah Mevushal, Rav Yoshia Oser, he prohibits you from eating that which is roasted. In other words, according to Rabbi Oshia, roasting is included in cooking. So when you say that you took a neder min ha mevushal, it doesn't mean that it was necessarily boiled in hot water, but even if it was barbecued or grilled over a fire, which is what we call tzli, nevertheless, it's included on the bishul. Now, this is interesting because if you would ask me what cooking is, I would never include roasting under cooking. And neder is l'chora holchanach loshem b'nei adam. But Rav Oshia is going to build his case on the biblical definition of bishul. But he admits that afal pishen raya davar, he can't prove that the neder that a person takes which is determined by his mental intention, is dependent upon the biblical definition of that term. So that's only a zeichel l'dova. The Gemara is going to tell us that a zeichel l'dova is like an asmachta. So where do we see in Tanakh that Sli is included on the Bishul? Shenemar Apostle in Divrei Yomim, referring to the Korban Pesach, which is Sli, Vayvashlu HaPesach Ba'esh Kamishpat. So you see that the word Bishul, Vayvashlu, as a conjugated active verb, is inclusive of that which is Sli. Now here, if you take a look in the Gilyon HaShas of Reb Kiva Eger, he doesn't understand why Rav Ashi has to stretch his arm out all the way to Divrei Hayomim. What about a pasuk in Chumash? The Torah itself says in Dvarim Perek Tezayin, with regard to Korban Pesach, Ubishalta v'Achalta, and clearly Korban Pesach is Tzli, and yet it says Ubishalta. In any event, we see clearly that Rabbi Oshia rejects our Mishnah, and a Nedarim and a Mavushal, according to Rav Oshia, includes even Tzli. Lema b'haka miflagi. To Rav Oshia Sover halachach lashon Torah. We'll use biblical Hebrew to interpret the words of his Nedarim. Tana Didan. By contrast, our Tana, Sovar, Shebenidorim halach achar lashon b'nei Adam. What did he mean? What does an average person mean? And Bishul and Sli clearly are two different things in lashon b'nei Adam. Lo. Gemara rejects this. The Kuli Alma, even Rav Oshia holds that Benidorim halach achar lashon b'nei Adam. But rather, there's no machlokas here between the Tanakama of Mishnah and Rav Oshia and the Brisa, because Mar ki asrei. There were different locales, and there were different uses of languages in the different locales. The asra de Tana Dilan in the area where our Tana lived, Litzli correlates Sli. They distinguish sharply between that which is roasted and that which is cooked. And by contrast, Biasud Rav Oshia in his locale, afilu tzli kari mevushal. They would use the word mevushal even if it referred to tzli. So the Gemara immediately asks, how can you tell me that Rav Ashi's determination was based on the usage in his locale, when Rav Oshia proves his point by quoting a pasuk in Divrei Hayomim? And the Gemara answers, Asmachta v'alma. His proof is not from the pasuk. The pasuk is only a remez. It's only a support b'derech remez. So again, it's interesting that the Gemara even had a havamina that Rav Oshia was basing himself on a pasuk, because Rav Oshia himself said it's only a zeichel l'dova. But why does Rav Oshia really bring this pasuk? Why? What does he gain by an asmachta b'alma? And according to the Ran, there's a tremendous nafkamina from this pasuk, because let's say the man speaks Lashon Kodesh, when he uses Lashon Kodesh and he uses the biblical meaning of the words. Or, for example, if let's say we're not clear and we don't know in any particular locale exactly what the Lashon B'nei Adam is, then the Kosev Ashlishi Achriya B'neim is the pasuk. So when Rav Oshia tells us that, he doesn't tell us that we in our locale call Tzli Mavushal, but rather he says there's a pasuk. He's only trying to cover the case where a person spoke Lashon Kodesh, or alternatively, we don't know exactly what language and what usage of words are in that particular place. The Mishnah says, Kodem Tavshil Sheni Toim. He's not allowed to eat a Masechet because, as we said, there's a certain liquid element there, but he's allowed to eat something that's solid. So the Gemara immediately raises the objection of Hami Tavshil Nodar. How are you telling me that he's allowed to eat a tavshil ava, that which is thick? What are you telling me? That's not called a tavshil? I mean, he took a neder not to eat a tavshil. So whether it's thick or it's liquid style, in both cases it's a tavshil. Omar Abaye, Hai Tana, the Tana of our Mishnah, called Midi de Misakli Be Rifta Tavshil Korele. His dictionary definition of the word tavshil is that which is malafes bas apas. And if it's a maisa kedera ava, then you don't need a piece of bread with something that's totally thick. There's no liquid to dip it into. And therefore, kedera maisa kedera ava is not called a tavshil. He says in the name of Tosus, "Kevan shaderech lishros es apas b'maisa ketera zeh, az zeh nechshal tavshil." So when he dips his pas into the liquid element of this maisa kedera, that's called a tavshil. But if it's ava, there's no liquid, he will not dip his pas, and therefore it doesn't have the status. And it's not included in the meaning of the word tavshil. So the Gemara immediately objects, Vatanya, hanodim in a tavshil also b'chol mini tavshil. We see from this brisa that if he employs the word tavshil in his neder, he's not allowed to eat any kind of tavshil. Also b'tzli, b'sholok, b'mevushal. He's not allowed to eat that which is roasted, that which is overcooked or undercooked, and certainly that which is cooked. All of these are eaten with a pas. But not only that, osur behitrios, rakos, shacholim ochlim and piton. Now, I believe that the word vatanya here is not a question that has to be answered. He's not raising a stira from our Mishnah to this price, but rather it's an embellishment. It is serving to shed a light on this principle as Abai formulated that called midin misakli be rifta tavshel karibe. Because in the cases of tzli, sholok, and mavushal, they are eaten together with a pas. How do I know such a thing? Because the Ran says it. I didn't make it up. I didn't go to culinary school. I'm not an expert chef. I know that sometimes I would take, let's say, roast or grilled schnitzel. Let's say it doesn't have a covering of how do you say in English, pirurei lechem, of breadcrumbs, and I'll put it inside a roll, inside a baguette. I'll heat up the baguette first and toast it. That I don't know if that's what the Gemara has in mind here, but the Gemara certainly says that you can take something that's roasted and eat it with pas. That's how the Ran interprets that sugya. Now these hitrios are deluim daktanim, very small pumpkins. And who would eat pumpkins with a pas, with a piece of bread? And the answer is it was some sort of a dish that was served to cholim, to those who were ill. Maybe they had stomach disorders, I don't know. And ochel b'mespiton, they would eat that pas together with these small deluim. So now we get into a whole discussion about medicine. Is it a healthy thing to eat pumpkins? Well, the answer is it depends what part of the pumpkin you're eating. There's hearts of pumpkin and there's the pumpkin itself. Any for her, Rabbi Yirmiyah Cholash, Rabbi Yirmiyah was ill. And a doctor came to visit him. But the doctor just ran away. Why? Chaza, he saw Kara Dlas is called kara in Aramaic. The mochis bebese, that was sitting down on his dining room table, shav kevinovke, he left him. He says, Omar Malach Mosa Islay L'Dain Besa. The Malach HaMovis is here in this house. If he's eating Dalas, he's going to die. V'anoa Euli Asil Yaseh, will I, B'loshen Tmiyah, go into his house to heal him when he's in the clutches of the Malach HaMovis? So what is it? Do we accept the brisa that Tuluim are fit for cholim and they have medicinal value, or we do accept the story of Rabbi Yirmiyah that Tuluim are very dangerous? Lo kasha. There are two categories of Tuluim. Ha berakiche, the brisa that says that Tuluim is very good for the cholim, is talking about soft pumpkins. They are very medicinal. And the case of the Rofe, where he said that Tuluim are such a danger that he ran out of the house, that's a case of Hashune, of Tuluim Kashim, very tough pumpkins. And I'm just guessing that he probably didn't cook it long enough, so the pumpkins remain very, very hard. Rava Bar Ula Omar, he has a different reconciliation. Ha Bekara Gufe. The Rofe who ran out of the house is because they were feeding the chola from the Guf Hadluim, Vaha Begavyuve Dekara, and the brisa that says that Dluin is very beneficial for a sick person. That's when they ate Begavyuve, means the insides, the heart of the Dluim. Like if you ever seen those, those pits, and it's very soft in the inside. The Omer Rabbi Yehuda Lulave Dekara, which again, the hearts of pumpkin, Bisilka, if you eat it together with Trudim, which I believe are beets, or possibly spinach, but let's assume they're beets. Vilulave de Kisna, and flax seeds, which are like the hearts of the flax. Bikutcha, if you dip it into kutach, kutach is a kind of a sour cream, which is made of 3 ingredients, as the Gemara establishes in Masechet Pesachim Daf Mem Beis. It's chalav, kind of like sour milk, pasma upeshes, and it is spoiled bread, umelach, and salt, which is called in the Gemara's language in Pesachim Chametz al Yidei Tarovis. Davar zeh asul yom b'fnei bamar. It's all of the above. If you take the hearts of the pumpkin together with, let's call it beets, and the hearts of the flax seeds, and you dip them all into kutach, that's a very healthy thing. And we should not tell the Amayoritz about it. And here we have machlokas, exactly why we have to deny the Amayoritz this knowledge, this medicinal knowledge. According to the Ran's Pshat, it's because the Amayoritz will go around stealing all the flax. They realize how valuable it is. Pharmaceutically, they're going to steal it. However, the Chassam Sofer has a different interpretation. And he says that if we encourage the masses, meaning including the Amayoritz, to eat the hearts of the dlas, together with tardin, etc., they're going to make a mistake and they'll eat even the guf hatlas, and that's going to bring them to a dangerous situation. And finally, we have a third answer to reconcile the question of Tuluim, whether it's healthy or not. My man cholin. Rava says that Tuluim are not healthy for a chola, whether or not they're hard or whether or not they're the soft middle hearts of the Tluim, leave it out. And the brisa that advocates in favor of feeding Tluim to the Cholim, Man Cholim Rabbanan, it's reference to Talmidei Chachamim, that are called Cholim because Torah Mateshes Kochel Shel Adam, and with regard to Talmidei Chachamim that are not really sick, Tluim could be healthy, could be effective. But if you have someone who's a mamish, a chola, then Tluim are mazikin, if matters not with the kosher marakim. And Rav L'tameh, we're going to see that Rav is very consistent here when he uses the term cholim to describe Talmidei Chachamim Rabbanan who are oskim b'Torah.